Welcome to the Military Times Reporters Roundtable, where we bring you the inside stories behind the headlines in the military community each week. I'm Leo Shane, Capitol Hill Bureau Chief for Military Times. With me again this week are Megan Myers, our Pentagon Bureau Chief, and Howard Altman, our Managing Editor. Thank you both for joining us. Look, we've made it through the first half of a very eventful 2021. We got a new president this year. We got a new defense secretary. We still have a new Space Force. So let's take a minute now and look ahead at the future to examine some of the biggest questions facing the Defense Department as we go on through the second half of the year. Howard, let me start with you. In May, President Biden announced that he planned to pull all U.S. personnel out of Afghanistan by September 11th. It looks like that work may be done in the next few weeks here before the summer's out, with only about 650 service members staying behind for embassy security duties. But is that it? Or do you think we're really going to be completely out of Afghanistan, or are we going to end up sending personnel back in before the end of the year?
It's very unlikely to almost not at all going to happen that we'll send troops back to Afghanistan by the end of the year or any time in the future. I spoke to Marine Corps General Kevin McKenzie, the head of U.S. Central Command, about this, and I asked him, do you see any way that U.S. troops will be going back to Afghanistan? And he said no. Now, one possibility is that CIA is in there. You remember that in 2001, when the Green Berets and Rangers went into Afghanistan, that there were CIA officers involved with that too. It's maybe even possible that at some point U.S. Tier 1 Special Operations Forces are so-called sheep-dipped into Title 50 and operate under the CIA rubric, but it's very, very unlikely we're going to see any U.S. troops on the ground in Afghanistan. I talked to McKenzie about the continuing training mission. He said that it'll likely happen in another country, that they'll help the Afghan Air Force remotely, as well as take aircraft and pilots out for training to another country. But the likelihood of U.S. troops being on the ground in Afghanistan after September 11th is very, very unlikely.
Yeah, but Howard, that issue of the remote action, or this over-the-horizon force to be able to combat terrorism and insurgents, that's a real concern. That's a real worry of especially conservative lawmakers who have said this is the recipe for another Iraq, another situation where U.S. troops are going to have to go back in later on. So what do we make of that, and how confident is the DoD that they can really attack these insurgent groups and support the Afghan government forces from afar if they're not on the ground there?
I mean, it is obviously a big concern. As you see right now in Afghanistan, there are a number of districts that are falling to the Taliban. There was a Taliban fighter that took a selfie in Mazar-e-Sharif, which was one of the first cities in Afghanistan to fall in 2001, and they haven't been back there in 20 years. It's a big issue, a big concern. I talked to McKenzie about this. He said that the only way that U.S. forces would have any kind of kinetic action in Afghanistan is if U.S. national security interests are threatened and Afghan forces cannot do anything about it. And that's where the limitations are on any U.S. involvement on the ground or in the air in Afghanistan.
So Megan, what's the feeling in the Pentagon? I mean, is this forever war really over?
I mean, it's a lot like, what Howard was saying with General McKenzie, that at this point, everyone's really ready to get out of Afghanistan and sort of see what happens. For this year, at least, that's the plan. Like Howard said, there's a possibility that, we could have some special operations forces there in a more clandestine counter-terror capacity. But as far as the train, advise, assist of the Afghan National Army and the National Police, it's, we're gonna continue to pay for those things. So it's not really over, but as far as our troops on the ground there, that is over for the foreseeable future.
Well, another big change that we're going to see in the next few months is the issue of sexual assault in the military. In June, Secretary Lloyd Austin said that he would support taking those crimes, taking those prosecutions out of the hands of the chain of command, put them into independent prosecutors. Really a momentous change, one that the department has resisted for a long time. Some members of Congress want to go even further now, though. Look, take the prosecution of serious crimes, felonies, out of the chain of command completely, beyond just sexual assault crimes. So Megan, where do you see this? How do you see this playing out over the next few months?
It's going to be really interesting because now that the Defense Department has gotten on board with this idea of taking sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence, and some other related crimes out of the chain of command's prosecution authority, now Congress is kind of at odds with them a little bit because Congress says, oh, actually, we would like to take all felonies, murders, assaults, all of those things out of the chain of command. The Defense Department's not on board with that. But even beyond that, there are some sexual assault, sexual harassment, domestic violence charges that are misdemeanors. And where would those end up under Congress's plan? So it's going to be interesting to see whether Congress gets on board with what the Pentagon is now proposing, knowing that the Pentagon is going to need some of Congress's authority to do what they want to do, or if Congress is going to sweep through, those lawmakers are going to sweep through and say, no, we're doing all felonies, and we'll figure something else out for the misdemeanors.
Howard, this would be a pretty significant shift and a real decision point for a lot of lawmakers here.
Well, it would be a huge shift. And as Megan mentioned, the Pentagon, and specifically Secretary of Defense Lloyd Austin, has come out and said he does not support taking anything besides sexual misconduct and those related crimes out of the chain of command. So that would be really up to what Congress does. And Leo, speaking of Congress, when do you think we'll see a defense budget?
Yeah, that's a great question, Howard. We're looking at a defense budget cycle that is usually most of the way through when we hit this part of the summer. But the budget didn't get introduced until May. It was 3 months late. We're seeing fights over the top lines. This is looking like we're going to go pretty deep into the next fiscal year, which starts October 1st, before we see anything. So annual defense authorization bill, which I know a lot of our viewers pay attention to, that helps set the pay raise each year. That's probably not going to be settled until close to Christmas. Same with the defense budget. We could be going into yet another year where the defense budget just gets drug on into the new year. So 4 months, 5 months, 6 months into the fiscal year, that means new programs don't get started. That means some new bonuses don't start. It becomes a real headache and a real mess down the road. So Megan, is the Pentagon getting stressed out about this yet? This is pretty late in the budget cycle for where we're at.
There hasn't been the same maybe panic that you would describe it as in recent years, where generals and officials would go to think tanks and say, we need on-time, predictable funding. I think they're all sort of just holding their breath and and waiting it out. They've had to deal with this a lot. Getting an on-time budget has been a rarity more often these past few years. So I think they're just kind of digging in and waiting and seeing.
We're just a couple of weeks away from the start of college football season. So, only 5 months until the big Army-Navy game. Megan, what's your prediction for the contest this year?
I have a visual aid for this one.
Uh-oh. Oh, very nice.
Sorry,
very
guys.
nice. Howard, what's your take on the Army? It's December 11th. It's right around the corner. You got to start making your picks, Howard. What do you got?
Absolutely. Well, my dad was in the Army, so I'm going to go Army 24-17.
Oh, see, all right, perfect. So we got one of each, and we'll make fun of the other one of you, and that way I don't have to make any predictions. I can just sit here and say, why were you predicting college football 5 months early? That's crazy. So listen, thank you both for coming on. Thanks to our viewers for tuning in this week. You can follow all of our coverage for the next 5 months, for the next few years at militarytimes.com. We'll see you next time.